Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, March 8th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The spring game is in 39 days, the Notre Dame game in 179 days, the game against Michigan in 263 days. The Big Ten men's basketball tournament starts tomorrow, and the Buckeyes will be playing earlier than they had probably hoped. Just 10 days ago, Chris Holtmann's team was coming off a huge road win over Illinois. Just needed to win its last 4 games, all against teams below them in the standings, to clinch at least a tie for the Big Ten regular season championship and a double bye for the conference tournament. Great. How hard could that be? Well, then they lost 3 of those games, and now they enter this week as the 6th seed in the Big Ten tournament. So what went wrong, and what is next for this team? My guest today is Tony Gerdeman. Tony, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, as always, Tom. It is a pleasure and a joy to talk about Ohio State basketball with you.
Every once in a while. Sometimes I think you're being sarcastic. Every once in a great while. But I think we do need to start with, what the heck happened to this team? We talked about this team, 10 days ago. It was less than 2 weeks ago. We talked about this team on the show, and it was like, here's all the reasons to feel optimistic about what could happen for Ohio State basketball moving forward. And oh boy, they found more than one banana peel. They lose a 15-point game to a bottom feeder like Maryland that has an interim coach right now. Then you lose at home to the team that was at the time dead last in the conference, Nebraska. I mean, how do you square those? Those were the next 2 games after the Illinois road win. So how do you square that with a team that was on the cusp of the league title just before that?
I think you square it by acknowledging that this is what Ohio State is this year. They can beat very good teams, as we've seen. They winning at Illinois, beating Wisconsin 3 months ago by 15 or so points, beating Duke, having wins like that, losing a buzzer beater at Purdue. They have that capability. But all that time, they are also a team that can lose to Rutgers. Again, Rutgers has played well, but the Nebraska loss at home, just really, really disappointing. And Ohio State is not so much more talented than everybody that they can, this isn't one of those, as I say, throw the helmets out there, roll the ball out there, because they have too many flaws. And when they're playing well, they can shield some of those flaws, but they're still there, and they can kind of just show up anytime. I don't want to say it's like shingles, but just at any point, I don't know what's that pain in my, whatever. And I think that's kind of what the team is. And then then there's also so much film, and this is, for some of these teams, it's the second time they're playing Ohio State, and then they have the book is out on all of them, including guys like EJ Liddell and now Malachi Branham, who has been coming on, but now teams know more about him, and they try to attack him different ways as well.
And I do like comparing Ohio State men's basketball to shingles. That's I'm gonna maybe make that the title of this episode. Ohio State basketball, is it like shingles? There are some explanations, and you touched on a couple of them there, but something else that I think we had even looked at in advance of this stretch was the schedule is pretty condensed right now. It was those last 4 games. We were on 4 games in the span of 8 days because there were some COVID makeups with the Nebraska game, and they had a COVID makeup with the Iowa game earlier. So it was a condensed schedule. They're also pretty banged up right now. I mean, just Towns and Sewing have been out for the whole year basically, but they've had some other injuries recently. They've been missing a lot of guys. Kyle Young had to miss the Michigan game with a concussion. I mean, how much do you chalk up to condensed schedule? How much do you chalk up to the fact that these guys were banged up? And how much do you chalk up to there are some serious structural issues, and the film is out there and all that other kind of stuff that you talked about?
I think those are all real things, and when they compound upon each other, Ohio State's not good enough to overcome. Sometimes Ohio State's not good enough to overcome its roster. Then you add in injuries. Then you add in a compressed schedule. But Michigan had a compressed schedule down the stretch as well, and we saw how well Michigan did down the stretch in the second half of that game at Ohio State. So, I don't think it's unique. Michigan was without Hunter Dickinson, their starting center. Possibly all Big Ten type player with a stomach bug, and so they were undermanned, and they were tired, just like Ohio State, but they responded. And I think all of this is real. And you mentioned Seth Towns and Justice Suing. Chris Holtmann said earlier in the week regarding those two, like, you never expect to be without two of your top 8 players. I don't know if Seth Towns should have actually been considered a top 8 player, because if you're counting on him this year, you're probably not being honest with yourself. And because you just don't know what you're going to get out of him. But Justice Suing, that is he was I'd say top 2 player with him and EJ Liddell, and certainly would be a top 3 player at this point right now with Malachi Branham as well. So you take that guy away from any team and you're going to suffer. That's a guy who can run the point. He could play the 4 for you. I mean, he can rebound the ball and bring it up the court for you. He can help you break the press, which we've seen Ohio State has struggled with that. When they get pressed, they don't really, they sometimes look like they've never seen it before. And so losing Suing is certainly significant, but they've been without him all year, so they know how to operate without him. But, they are what they are. Michi Johnson hasn't come along as much as I think Holtmann would have hoped. Earlier in the season, through the first half of the season, Michi was playing a lot, trying to get him ready for this stretch run, and I don't think it happened. That's why you've seen more Cedric Russell, some Jimmy Sotos here and there. Malachi Branham running some point just to get some free minutes of rest for Jamari Wheeler. But I think these are all legitimate reasons, for why Ohio State is what they are. And, I still think the most significant is just, it's not the best roster, and everybody has flaws. Even EJ Liddell has flaws. And so, it's just difficult to put it all together, because you need so many guys to play well in order to win a game, and sometimes that just doesn't happen.
We always talk this time of year about how tournaments are just all about matchups, and you can be a 2 seed and get a 15 seed that's not a good matchup, or you can be a 3 seed and get a 14 seed that's not a good matchup, or whatever the case may be. What kind of team is Ohio State hoping to see this time of year? Like, who represents a good matchup for Ohio State, or maybe looking at it the flip side, which kind of team would represent a particularly bad matchup for Ohio State that they might want to avoid?
Yeah, I think what they would like to see is a team that struggles defensively, and they got that against Michigan, and it was good for a little while until it wasn't, because Ohio State then forgot about defense. So I think teams with size and athleticism are not good for them, guys. And you saw that with Michigan, with Diabate matched up against EJ Liddell. Diabate has size and he has athleticism. He's got length, and it makes shots difficult for Liddell. Liddell took 10 shots against Michigan, and that's probably not enough for one of the top 5 or 6 players in the Big Ten. And so the size is definitely an issue. And now with injuries to Zed Key, and you've got Kyle Young dealing with his concussion, if you've got a big center that can control the paint, that's bad news. But I still think what has also doomed Ohio State is just their defense. And so if they can play a team that doesn't shoot well and doesn't defend well, I feel pretty good about their chances. But defensively, Ohio State has really been struggling of late. I'm just looking at the scores here. They've given up, the last time they gave up fewer than 69 points was February 15th. That's 7 straight games of giving up nearly 70 plus points a game. And really that doesn't seem like Big Ten basketball to me.
Yeah, that is a little more wide open than you typically would think of as a Big Ten team. They will open against some Big Ten teams on Thursday. It's going to be either Minnesota or Penn State. Those two teams play on Wednesday. Winner gets Ohio State on Thursday. If Ohio State beats the winner of that game, they get Purdue on Friday. Speaking of teams with some size and athleticism, the Purdue Boilermakers, that doesn't seem like that's probably a great matchup for Ohio State right now, which means you're looking at probably, a 6, 7 seed for the NCAAs, which means then it's an uphill climb to get to the Sweet 16. At that point, you have seen sort of the immediate overreaction of fire Chris Holtmann right now, and I don't think there's any real chance that happens this year. But if he goes through another year, this is the 5th year now, and obviously they didn't have a tournament in 1 year in 2020, but this is his 5th year. They still will probably not have made the Sweet 16 at that point. You have not won the Big Ten regular season championship, any of that stuff. It seems like next year is probably a pretty big year for Chris Holtmann, where if you don't get to the Sweet 16 this year, that's probably something you're going to want to make sure you do next year, or maybe the conversation changes a little bit around him.
Yeah, and I think what we also need to keep in mind is this is now his third season dealing with COVID. Like, he's coaching, you miss the second half of the tournament of the first year, and then last year everybody's still existing in COVID. This year they've had games postponed, and we talked about the compressed schedule. That's 3 years impacted by this. And do you how much does that weigh against Holtmann? And he's still winning 20 games. That was at the end of Thad Matta's tenure. That became this thing like, yeah, who cares? You should, 20 games with a cupcake schedule. But this hasn't been a cupcake schedule. It's been certainly better than Matta's schedules. But yeah, I think there needs to be more that comes from this. And I think the recruiting will pick up. They've got a good recruiting class coming in next season, and we'll see how that meshes with what they've got. We know they're losing Jamari Wheeler, yes, but EJ Liddell. They said goodbye to 7 guys on senior day, and they did not throw in Seth Towns and Justice Suing there, so they could be back, they could be gone. This is going to be a very different roster next year, but I don't know what to say. I think there's going to be more overall talent, but it's going to be young. And how much will you miss EJ Liddell? Quite a bit. So, I'm kind of with you that something needs to happen next year. But if it doesn't, it's a young team. Malachi Branham, everybody's talking about him. He'll be a sophomore next year. Should he come back? Like, he's still young. And, EJ Liddell was a sophomore last year, and you saw like you can only go so far with young guys like that who are still growing and still limited. But Chris Holtmann's also responsible for putting this roster together. And you bring in transfer point guards, they come and go. Sometimes you get them for 2 years, just depending on where they are in terms of graduation and eligibility. Next year, however, you've got Michi Johnson. They're bringing in some recruits where these guys will be here longer. And, but then are you missing that senior leadership in the backcourt as well? It's been really hard for him to put it all together, for Chris Holtmann to put it all together. And I don't know that it's going to be all together next year. They'd certainly love to have EJ Liddell back. And then, next year they'll have their whatever they are. And it's like, boy, it sure would be great for Malachi Branham to be back as a junior, but that's probably not going to happen. So you're always chasing the next year that just can't happen because of the nature of the sport. But ultimately, Tom, Ohio State should have a better basketball program than Purdue, should have a better basketball program than Wisconsin, should have a better basketball program than just about anybody in the Big Ten. Look at the effort and the money that gets spent in the entire athletic department, but like football. There's no reason that you can't have that same focus and success and results in basketball, in my opinion. Chris Holtmann might differ. His opinion may differ, but I do think that a lot of the success of the Ohio State basketball program has been surrounded by Ohio high school basketball. And it culminates with guys who are really good Ohio players who stay home. And you're seeing that less and less. If Thad Matta was a beneficiary of geography, Greg Oden and Mike Conley weren't in state, but they were from Indiana. He had a relationship with them. David Leidy, William Buford, Jared Solinger, all of these guys, Aaron Kraft. You look at what's been through Ohio since Chris Holtmann has been here, and it's not been great. And I think in-state is drifting more and more away from stuff because of AAU basketball and all of that stuff. So, long answer short, Tom, I blame the Ohio high schools.
Always a good target in various areas. Yeah, and I mean that is an important point, that you don't get Ohio high school players, sort of automatically the way you do with football because of the AAU circuits, and guys are playing with different teams and guys from all over the country, and they're playing all over the country in a way that high school football players generally aren't. So yeah, that is an important distinction there, because I think people will look at the top players in Ohio and go, well, Ohio State should get all of them. It's like, well, not necessarily. Good because of those reasons, but also because, well, there's other there are other programs in the state which are a lot closer to Ohio State in basketball than there are in football. So there's the competition in state's a little bit tougher there as well. So, all right, so we'll leave it right there. I'm sure we'll have another basketball show at some point in the next week or two as tournament stuff gets rolling. But that will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.